So I decided that I'm gonna do a video that explains a little of the probably not so well known facts about gladius, because most people care more about two-handed blades like either a long sword or katana. But without the blades that came before it, you probably wouldn't get the blades that came after it. So it's kind of a way to show like a little bit of appreciation. So what I'm gonna go over is different types of gladius. I'm gonna go over where it came from, where it probably descended from, and the name of it itself. So the name gladius is actually Latin for sword. There's actually a lot of Latin terms that was going around in ancient Rome and whatnot. And fun fact, in the Shakespearean play, when Brutus and Cassius basically betray Caesar and they have to figure out what they're gonna do next, he saw like a ghost of someone. I forget who the person was, but I noticed that he was speaking in old Latin to the ghost. So it's actually got like quite a few old ties to a lot of the things that the ancient Romans did and whatnot. So I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so there's two places where they say that the gladius could have possibly descended from. So I noticed when I saw like this type of gladius that it looks similar to an old Greek sword called a zephos. I think if I'm like pronouncing that right. It basically is like this blade, except only it has like a thinner profile. There's like something. Some of them look like they have like a diamond cross cut, but others can probably have like maybe more of a flat end like this. But yeah, it's a really old Greek sword, and I think yeah, it was probably like because they had like the younger type of forging, so it's like they had like a little more like bronze in that period. I think when they got closer to the Romans, they started making more like steel smelting and stuff. So basically, it's a bit like tougher, more tankier. And the other place they say that it could have descended from is when they had like a campaign against the Celts. They were fighting in what would become modern day Spain. There was like a lot of different areas. They was basically fighting people from all over. So they had seen like the Hispanic type swords, and basically they started to like adapt some of the attributes of their swords into their swords, and that became what would become the first gladius. And they basically went on to take that design and incorporate it, and basically start to improve on it from there. So I'm not really sure which one I believe, because I've seen a Zephos, and then I looked at one of the types of gladius, and I'm like, dude, that looks exactly. It just looks like a tankier type of basically the same sword with like some improved designs. And knowing some of the few things that I know about Roman history, I know that they basically like take designs and basically like improve on them like all the time. It's basically probably would something that will become adapted in like every pretty much successful military into the world, even those that are like pretty successful today. Like Americans, still we have generals that read Sun Tzu's Art of War. I think it's like for most generals to read. Actually, it's a pretty good read in general, but yeah, you kind of get what I'm going into. And I'm about to get into the types. Saying before, they had like the Hispanic type sword, which they called it back then. They called it Hispanices. I mean, it's like a really weird looking word, so it's kind of like difficult for me to basically say it. But it basically roughly translates to Hispanic type sword. So it was the one that they developed on after they were fighting in that one campaign. So it's like the longest type of gladius that they have. It's like got. It basically looks more like a really short sword rather than the classic gladiuses that we would come to know that were like a little bit much more short. But basically it was the earliest known gladius that they had, and they first started to improve on it after that, which it was preceded and replaced and phased out by the mains type, which is this one that looks closer to the Zephos type. It has like these flared tips, basically more or less outside of the point. Like if you can see, it starts to get like a little bit larger and wider towards basically the tip and the point. And it had these. They were pretty devastating in combat, which they use them in formations with the scutum, which they do that with most of them. But these ones, as you can see, are kind of like more of a. It's easier to like thrust and bite into people, but it actually does have some pretty good cutting capabilities, despite the people that might say that it's pretty much a thrust only sword. As you've seen in some of my videos, it's pretty can be a pretty wicked cutter. Like it's got next to no flex. It's kind of like a knife in the sense that because it's like really thin and basically like pretty small, you don't need like a super huge amount of flex because you can deal with it being that short. Generally, the longer the swords get, the more you start to need some extra flex to it. But the mains type I think was used throughout most of their pretty hardcore wars. It's probably I would say the most famous type of gladius they got. It's one of the most numerous designs and whatnot. So the next type that came after the mains, I think it might have seen some action while it was at the same time as the mains type was the h.e.m.a type. It basically had the most tapered edge out of all the four different types of gladii or gladius. I'm not really sure what's the actual plural of it, but basically that one side the most tapered edge, so it was probably the one that was most used for like getting around some difficult armor and some other gaps and whatnot. That's what I know from longsword, but I'm assuming that it saw some time during that or during wartime. And then there was the Pompeii type. The Pompeii type was the shortest of all four types of gladii, and it was during a period in Rome called the Pax Romana, which was basically the most peaceful times that they had in Rome. If you because I have a picture and I'm gonna show it to you, but it's like you can tell that was the one that was used for probably like the most peaceful times because all of the stuff like the flaring and the things that made it more lethal in battle, it basically looks probably relatively like the most not for wartime, if I guess that makes any sense. Because instead I looked at it, I'm like, I said before I started to research it, this was probably used during a relative time of peace because it doesn't look as destructive as the other ones, and I was right. Pax Romana was basically like the most peaceful time in the Roman Empire, and it was probably used more in civilian duels than anything. It was basically not super destructive, and they had a more peaceful thing going there. So you basically start to phase out more destructive weapons like other stuff that would rip a hole open in people. It was still probably a pretty good sword, but not as destructive as the other ones that came before. So hope you guys enjoyed all the extra tidbits and facts that nobody asked for.